which is, does the Congress have the right to expect that a duly issued subpoena will be fulfilled by the Attorney General? That's really what all of this comes down to in the course of an investigation that everybody seems to agree is absolutely worthwhile and should get the highest priority. So a lot of questions here. Does executive privilege even apply? Can the Attorney General decide that this won't go any further if it is in fact referred to the Attorney General in the District of Columbia, which is a possibility here? All sorts of questions, and I don't have all the answers, but I know somebody who might. I want to bring in Representative James Lankford. He's of the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you on it.
So obviously, we saw a lot of stuff today. It was pretty amazing, and I wanted to ask you right off the bat here, the invoking executive privilege, that would seem to indicate, contrary to testimony given many times by Attorney General Holder and others, that if executive privilege was in fact invoked here, it would mean that senior executives like the Attorney General must have known about this program. Otherwise, it would seem to be null and void. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. What's interesting about this is that the administration didn't invoke executive privilege for months on this. They continued to say, we're going to get you the documents, we're going to get you the documents. And finally, they got to the point they just stopped releasing documents to us. And then Eric Holder comes in last night to ISA and says, well, we'll brief you on what the documents contain and talk you through it. And then obviously we're not going to go for that. And so this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time, when we were starting the hearing, we get an announcement from the Assistant Attorney General saying, no, the White House will do this, will do executive privilege, yet we've yet to actually get the executive privilege coming down from the White House itself. So we're still hearing that it's coming, but we haven't had the opportunity to actually see it yet. But yeah, they dropped it at the final moment. This is a purely political dodge that they don't want to deal with these issues.
Now, I wanted to ask you, right now, it has not gone to a full floor vote for the House. Right. If the Attorney General does not produce the documents, or if some accommodation is not reached, do you foresee that happening?
Yes, next week. Yeah, the Speaker of the House has already announced and already scheduled floor time for next week that this will come before the full House. It does not have to go to the Senate. A contempt of Congress is either to the House, the Senate, or both bodies. Obviously, Eric Holder is in contempt of the House right now that we've duly subpoenaed the documents that he has to turn over, and he refuses to do that. And so he'll be in contempt of Congress, just the House, so it just has to be settled in the House.
Congressman Amy Holmes here. Yesterday you tweeted that it didn't have to come to this. And last July you were at a heritage event where you said that there's no way, quote, there's no way they couldn't have known, meaning administration officials, and quote, everything about this smells really bad. So my question to you, Congressman, is what does it smell like today?
It smells exactly the same today as it had in the past. There is no way they did not know. The local ATF in Phoenix, when they made requests for wiretaps, that went up to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who then sent it to the executives in the Department of Justice, straight up to Washington, D.C. They went through all the wiretap requests. They're very involved, very detailed. It's very clear if you read through those requests for a wiretap exactly what was going on. There's no way they could not have known. And then yet, in February the 4th of last year, they sent a letter to Congress saying they had no idea this was going on. Then they sent another one in May and said we had no idea this was going on. And then in December of last year, they sent us an oops letter saying, yes, we did. We made a mistake in our previous letters. So they deceived us, and when they couldn't get away with it, we actually had the information on it. They came back and said, no, here's the new clarification. It's what Eric Holder has called an evolving truth. Which is a great new euphemism for they didn't tell us the truth at the beginning. They said, well, we just didn't know all the facts. Our truth is evolving.
So, Congressman, how high do you think this goes? Who do you think knows about this? Does it go to the very top, to the President of the United States?
You know what? That is the problem, is that because the Department of Justice won't turn over documents, we can't tell. We've been able to work through the ATF process last year, very smooth. We got the documents that we requested with each level of ATF being able to evaluate who knew, who had to be reassigned. The very top of ATF resigns and steps away the acting head of ATF, Melson. So we've gone through all that process with ATF, but when we get to the Department of Justice, they just shut down on us. So we have some pretty good theories. We think we know who all's there. Now, no one's made any statements to the President. Obviously, the President has a lot going on. But it is ironic that now the President is invoking executive privilege, which typically is used only for private conversations with the President or those internal conversations that he wants to protect. So no one's made any statements the President was involved until today. The President comes out and says, no, I need executive privilege on this.
Well, and Congressman Sassy Cup here, that's what I wanted to get at. The sense that I've had when I've talked to folks on the Hill today is that this executive privilege does in fact imply that the president himself had some knowledge or some conversations, and that is part of this. What are people talking about down there? Do you think there's going to be an effort to hold him accountable in addition to Holder and the Department of Justice at some point?
Our focus has been to follow the facts. That's been the focus from the very beginning. So wherever the facts take us, that's where we want to go. Brian Terry was murdered. It is right to be able to tell to his family, we're resolving this to make sure this never happens again to any other family, and that we hold to account the people that approved this or just weren't paying attention. So we're going to continue to follow the facts wherever they may lead. The interesting thing is, on March the 22nd of 2011, the president, in an interview with Univision television, he said at that time in this interview about Fast and Furious that Eric Holder didn't know about it, I didn't know about it, and we're going to follow through with an independent investigation on this, and we'll hold to account whoever needs to be held to account. So he makes that statement March the 22nd of last year. In May, the Department of Justice is still holding out and saying we had no idea about it. So there's some conflicting things even with that. I don't think the president is dealing with every single program, every single part of the Department of Justice and what they do, but there were some internal conversations about how do they recover from what was obviously not true in an earlier statement.